Hi, my name is Prerak Sharma. I am first year student of MBA Data Science and AI at IIT Mandi. As you all know, I have started a series of improving my communication skills for 20 minutes each day. Today also I'll be reading the same book as the previous day, Steve Jobs. And without wasting much time, let's begin. It's your call if you want to continue. It will mostly be me reading the book. It's your call if you want to leave or you want to stay. Thank you so much for watching. Let me begin. The negotiations. How would you like to help us? Today, here is job showed up at IBM Salon. The software they put on demo of Next, which impressed the IBM engineers. Of particular significance was Next Step, the machine's object-oriented operating system. Next Step took care of a lot of trivial programming codes that slowed down the software development process, said, and so impressed by Jobs that he named his newborn son Steve. The negotiations lasted into 1988, with Jobs becoming prickly over tiny details. He would stalk out meetings over disagreements about colors or design. About colors or design, only to be calmed down by dribble or leave-in. He didn't seem to know which frightened him more, IBM or Microsoft. In April, Parrott decided to play host for a meditating session at his Dallas headquarters, and a deal was struck. IBM would license the current version of NextStep software to know which frightened him more, IBM or Microsoft. Colors or design only to belong, and if the managers liked it, they would use it on some of their workstations, some of their workstations. IBM sent to Palo Alto a 125-page contract. Jobs tossed it down without reading. "You don't get it," he said as he walked out the room. He demanded a simpler contract of only a few pages, which he got within a week. Jobs wanted to keep the agreement secret from Bill Gates until the big unveiling of the next computer, scheduled for October, but IBM insisted on being forthcoming. Gates was furious. He realized this could mean IBM off its dependence on Microsoft operating system. Next step isn't compatible with anything, he raised to IBM executives. At first, Jobs seemed to have pulled off Gates' worst nightmare. Other computer makers that were beholden to Microsoft's operating systems, most notably Compaq and Dell, came to ask Jobs for the right to clone Next and license NextStep. There were even offers to pay a lot more if Next would get out of the hardware business altogether. That was too much for Job, at least for the time being. He cut off the clone discussions and he began to cool toward IBM. The chill became reciprocal. When the person who made the deal at IBM moved on, Jobs went to Armonk to meet his replacement, Jim Canavino. They cleared the room and talked one-on-one. Jobs demanded more money to keep the relationship going and licensed newer versions of NextStep to IBM. Canavino made no commitments and he subsequently stopped returning Jobs' phone calls. The deal lapsed. Next got a bit of money for licensing fee, but it never got the chance to change the world. Launched October 1988, Jobs had perfected the art of turning product launches into theatrical productions, and for the world premiere of the next computer on 12 October 1988 in San Francisco Symphony Hall, he wanted to outdo himself. He needed to blow away the doubters. In the weeks leading up to the event, he drove up to San Francisco almost every day to hole up in the Victorian house of Susan Kare, Nick's graphic designer who had done the original fonts and icons for the Macintosh. He helped prepare each of the slides as Jobs fretted over everything from the wording to the right hue of green to serve as the background color. "I like the green," he said proudly as they were doing a trial run in front of some staffers. Great green," they all murmured in accent. No detail was too small. Jobs went over the invitation list and even the lunch menu. He picked out a video projection company and paid it 60K for help, and he hired the postmodernist theatre producer George Coates to stage the show. Coates and Jobs decided, not surprisingly, on an austere and radically simple stage look. The unveiling of the black perfect cube would occur on a starkly minimalist stage setting with a black background, a table covered by a black cloth, a black veil draped over the computer, and a simple vase of flowers. Because neither the hardware nor the operating system was actually ready, Jobs was urged to do a simulation, but he refused, knowing it would be like walking a tightrope without a net. He decided to do the demonstration live. More than 3,000 people showed up at the event, lining up 2 hours before certain time. They were not disappointed, at least by the show. Jobs was on stage for 3 hours, and he again proved to be, in words of Henry Pollack of the New York Times, the Andrew Lloyd Webber of product introduction, a master of stage flair and special effects. Wes Smith of the Chicago Tribune said the launch was to product demonstrations what Vatican II was to church meetings. Jobs had the audience cheering from his opening line, "It's great to be back." He began by recounting the history of personal computer architecture, and he promised that they would now witness an event that occurs only once or twice in a decade, a time when a new architecture is rolled out that is going to change the face of computing. The next software and hardware were designed, he said, after 3 years of consulting with universities across the country. What we realized was the higher ed wants a personal mainframe. As usual, there were superlatives. The product was incredible, he said. The best thing we could have imagined. He praised the beauty of even the parts unseen, balancing on his fingertips the foot square circuit board that would be nestled in the foot cube box he enthused. I hope you get a chance to look at this a little later. It's the most beautiful printed circuit board I've ever seen in my life. He then showed how the computer could play speeches. He featured King's "I Have a Dream" and Kennedy's "Ask Not" and send email with audio attachments. He leaned into the microphone on the computer to record one of his own. "Hi, this is Steve sending a message on a pretty historic day." Then he asked those in the audience to add a round of applause to the message, and they did. One of Jobs' management philosophy was that it is crucial every now and then to roll the dice and bet the company on some new idea or technology. At the next launch, he boasted of an example that, as it turned out, would not be a wise gamble. Having a high capacity optical write disk and no floppy disk as a backup. 2 years ago, we made a decision. We saw some new technology and we made a decision to risk our company. Then he turned to a feature that would prove more prescient. "What we have done is made the first real digital books," he said, noting the inclusion of the Oxford edition of Shakespeare and other tomes. "There has not been an advancement in state of art of printed book technology since Gutenberg." At times, he could be amusingly aware of his own foibles, and he used the electronic book demonstration to poke fun at himself. "A word that sometimes used to describe me is Mer- mercurial," he said, then paused. The audience laughed knowingly, especially those in the front rows, which were filled with next employees and former members of Mac team. Then he pulled up the word in the computer's dictionary and read the first definition of or relating to a born under the planet Mercury. Scrolling down, he said, "I think the third one is the one, the mean, characterized by unpredictable changeableness of mode." There was a bit more laughter. If we scroll down the thesaurus through, we see that the antonym is Saturnine. Well, what's that? By simply double-clicking on it, we immediately look that up in the dictionary, and here it is: cold and steady in moods, slow to act or change, of a gloomy or surly disposition. A little smile came across his face. He waited for the ripple of laughter. "Well," he concluded, "I don't think mercurial is so bad after all." After the applause, he used the quotations back to back to make a more subtle point about his reality distortion field. The quote he chose was from Lewin Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. After Alice laments that no matter how hard she tries, she can't believe impossible things, the White Queen retorts, "Why, sometimes I have believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Especially from the front rows, there was a roar of knowing laughter. Laughter. All of the good cheer served to sugarcoat or distract attention from the bad news. When it came time to announce the price of the new machine, Jobs did what he would often do in product demonstration: reel off the features, describe them as being worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and get audience to imagine how expensive it should really be. Then he announced what he hoped would seem like a low price: "We are going to be charging higher education in a single price of $6,500." From the faithful, there was scattered applause, but his panel of academic advisors had long pushed to keep the price to be between 2K and 3K, and they thought the job was promised to do so. Some of them were appalled. This was especially true once they discovered that the optional printer would cost another $2,000, and the slowness of the optical disc would make the purchase of a $2,500 external hard disk advisable. There was another disappointment that he tried to downplay. Early next year, we will have a zero point 0.9 release, which is for software developers and aggressive end users. There was a bit of nervous laughter. What he was saying was that the real release of the machine and its software, known as the 1.0 release, would not actually be happening in early 1989. In fact, he didn't set a hard date. He merely suggested it would be sometime in second quarter of that year. At the first next retreat back in late 1985, he had refused to budge despite Johanna Hoffman's pushback from his commitment to have the machine finished in early 1987. Now it was clear it would be more than 2 years later. The event ended on a more upbeat note. Literally, Jobs brought on stage a violinist from the San Francisco Symphony who played bass a minor violin concerto in a duet with the next computer on stage. People erupted in jubilant applause. The price and the delayed release were forgotten in the frenzy. At the first next retreat, late back in 1985, he had refused to budge despite Joanna Huffman's pushback. His commitment to have made the machine right in early 1987. It was clear that it would be more than 2 years later. The event ended on a more upbeat note. Literally, Jobs brought on stage a violinist from San Francisco Symphony who played a minor violin concerto in a duet with the next computer on stage. People erupted in jubilant applause. The price and the delayed release were forgotten in frenzy. When a reporter asked him immediately afterward why the machine was going to be so late, Jobs replied, "It's not late, it's 5 years ahead of its time." As would become his standard practice, Jobs offered to provide exclusive interviews to anointed publications in return for their promising to put the story on cover. This time he went one exclusive too far, though it didn't really hurt. He agreed to a request from Business Week's Katie Hafner for exclusive access to him before the launch, but he also made a similar deal with Newsweek and then with Fortune. What he didn't consider was that one of Fortune's top editors, Susan Fricker, was married to Newsweek's editor, Maynard Parker. At the Fortune Story Conference, when they were talking excitedly about the exclusive, Fricker mentioned that she happened to know that Newsweek has also been promised to an exclusive and it would be coming out a few days before Fortune. So Jobs ended up that week on only two magazine covers. Newsweek used the cover line Mr. Chips and showed him leaning on Beautiful Next, which it proclaimed to be the most exciting machine in years. Business Week showed him looking angelic in a dark suit, fingertips pressed together like a preacher or professor. But Hafner pointedly reported on the manipulation that surrounded her exclusive. Next carefully parceled out interviews with his staff and suppliers, monitoring them with a censor's eye, she wrote. That strategy worked, but a price. Such maneuvering, self-serving, and relentless displayed the side of Steve Jobs that so hurt him at Apple. The trait that most stand out is Jobs' need to control events. When the hype died down, the reaction to the next computer was muted, especially since it was not commercially available. Bill Joy, the brilliant and wry chief scientist at Rival Sun Microsystems, called it the first yippee workstation, which was not an unalloyed compliment. Bill Gates, as might be expected, continued to publicly dismissively. "Frankly, I'm disappointed," he told the Wall Street Journal. "Back in 1981, we were truly excited by the Macintosh when Steve showed it to us because when you put it side by side with another computer, it was unlike anything anybody had ever seen before. The next machine was not like that. In the grand scope of things, most of these features are truly trivial." He said that Microsoft would continue his plan not to write software for Next. Right after the announcement event, Gates wrote a parody email to his staff. "All reality has been completely suspended," it began. Looking back at it, Gates laughs that it might not have been the best email I ever wrote. When the Next computer finally went on sale in mid 1989, the factory was primed to churn out 10,000 units a month. As it turned out, sales were about 400 a month. The beautiful factory robots, so nicely painted, remained mostly idle, and Nix continued to hemorrhage cash. Pixar, technology meets art. Lucasfilm's computer division. When Jobs was losing his footing at Apple in the summer of 1985, he went for a walk with Alan Kay, who had been at Xerox PARC and was then an Apple Fellow. Kay knew that Jobs was interested in the intersection of creativity and technology. So he suggested they go see a friend of his, Ed Catmull, who was running the computer division of George Lucas Film Studio. They rented a limo and rode up to Marion Country to the edge of Lucas Skywalker Ranch, where Catmull and his little computer division were based. I was blown away. And I came back and tried to convince Scully to buy it for Apple. They rented limo and rode up to Catmull, and I was blown away. And I came back and tried to convince Scully to buy it for Apple, Jobs recalled, but the folks running Apple weren't interested as they were busy kicking me out anyway. The Lucasfilm computer division made hardware and software for rendering digital images, and it also had a group of computer animators making shorts, which was led by a talented cartoon loving executive named John Lasseter. Lucas, who had completed his first Star Wars trilogy, was embroiled in a contentious divorce and he needed to sell off his division. He told Catmull to find a buyer as soon as possible. After a few potential purchases, both in the fall of 1985, Catmull and his colleague Albie Ray Smith decided to seek investors so that they could buy the division themselves. So they called Jobs, arranged another meeting in Newtown to his woodside house. After railing for a while about the perfidies and idiocies of Scully, Jobs proposed that he buy the Lucasfilm division outright. Catmull and Smith demurred. They wanted an investor, not a new owner. But it soon became clear that there was a middle ground. Jobs could buy a majority of the division and serve as chairman, but allow Catmull and Smith to run it. I wanted to buy it because I was really into computer graphics, Jobs recalled. I realized that they were ahead of others in combining art and technology, which is what I've always been interested in. He offered to pay Lucas $5 million plus invest another $5 million to he offered to pay Lucas to capitalize the division as a standalone company. That was far less than Lucas had been asking, but the timing was right. They decided to negotiate a deal. The chief financial officer at Lucasfilm found Jobs arrogant and prickly, so when it came time to hold a meeting of all the players, he told Catmull, "We have to establish the right taking order." The plan was to gather everyone in a room with Jobs, and then the CFO would come in a few minutes late to establish that he was the person running the meeting. But a funny thing happened. Catmull recalls Steve started the meeting on time without the CFO, and by the time the CFO walked in, Steve was already in control of the meeting. Jobs met only once with George Lucas, who warned him that the people in the division cared more about making animated movies than they did about making computers. These guys are hell-bent on animations. Lucas told him. Lucas later recalled, "I did warn him, and that was basically it and John's agenda. I think in his heart, he bought the company because that was his agenda too." The final agreement was reached in January 1986. It provided that for his $10 million investment, Jobs would own 70% of the company, with the rest of the stock distributed to Ed Catmull, Alvy Smith, and 38 other founding employees, down to the receptionist. The division's most important piece of hardware was called the Pixar Image Computer. The final agreement was reached in January 1986. It provided that for his $10 million investment, Jobs would own 70% of the company, with the rest of the stock distributed to Ed Catmull, Alvy Ray Smith, and the 38 other founding employees, down to the receptionist. The division most important piece of hardware was called the Pixar Image Computer, and from it, the new company took its name. For a while, Jobs led Catmull, and from it, the new company took its name. For a while, Jobs let Catmull and Smith run Pixar without much interference. Every month or so, they would gather for a board meeting, usually at Next headquarters, where Jobs would focus on the finances and strategy. Nevertheless, by dint of his personality and controlling instincts, Jobs was soon playing a stronger role. He spewed out a stream of ideas, some reasonable, others wacky, about what Pixar's hardware and software could become. And on his occasional visits to the Pixar office, he was an inspiring person. I grew up a Southern Baptist, and we had revival meetings with mesmerized but corrupt preachers, recounted Alvy Smith. Steve Scott it, the power of the tongue and the web of words that catches people up. We were aware of this when we had board meetings, so we developed signals, no scratching or ear tests, for when someone had been caught up in Steve's distortion field and he needed to be tucked back to reality. Jobs had always appreciated the virtue of integrating hardware and software, which is what Pixar did with its image computer and rendering software. It also produced creative content such as animated films and graphics. All three benefited from Jobs' combination of artistic creativity with technological geekiness. Silicon Valley folks don't really respect Hollywood creative types, and the Hollywood folks think that tech folks are people you hire and never have to meet. Jobs later said Pixar was one place where both cultures were respected. Initially, the revenue was supposed to come from the hardware side. The Pixar image computers sold for 125K. The primary customers were animators and graphic designers, but the machine also soon found specialized markets in the medical industry. CAT scan data would be rendered in 3D graphics and intelligence field for entering information from reconnaissance flights and satellites. Because of the sales to the National Security Agency, Jobs had to get a security clearance, which must have been fun for the FBI agent assigned to vet him. At one point, a Pixar executive recalled Jobs was called by the investigator to go over the drug use questions, which he answered unabashedly. The last time I used that, he would say, or on occasion, he would answer that no, he had actually never tried that particular drug. Jobs pushed Pixar to build a low cost version of the computer that would sell for around 30K. He insisted that Hartmut Esslinger designed it despite protests by Catmull and Smith about his fees. It ended up looking like the original Pixar image computer, which was a cube with a round dimple in the middle, but it had Esslinger's signature thin grooves. Jobs wanted to sell Pixar's computers to a mass market, so he had the Pixar folks open up sales offices, which he approved the design in major cities on the theory that creative people would soon come up with all sorts of ways to use this machine. My view is that people are creative animals and will figure out clever new ways to use tools that the inventor never imagined. He later said, I thought that would happen, but the Pixar computer was just as it did with the Mac. But the machine never took hold with regular consumer. It cost too much and there were not many software programs for it. On the software side, Pixar had a rendering program known as Race for making 3D graphics and images. After Jobs became chairman, the company created a new language and interface called RenderMan that it hoped would become a standard for 3D graphics rendering, just as Adobe's PostScript was for laser printing. As he had with the hardware, Jobs decided that they should try to find a mass market rather than just a specialized one for the software they made. He was never content to aim only at the corporate or high-end specialized markets. He would have these great visions of how RenderMan could be for every man. Recall Pankevin, Pixar's marketing director. He kept coming up with the ideas about how ordinary people would use it to make amazing 3D graphics and photorealistic images. The Pixar team would try to dissuade him by saying that RenderMan was not as easy to use as, say, Excel or Adobe Illustrator. Then Jobs would go to a whiteboard and show them how to make it simpler and more user friendly. We would be nodding our heads and getting excited and say, yes, yes, this will be great. Kerwin recalled, and then he would leave and we would consider it for a moment and then say, what the heck was he thinking? He was so weirdly charismatic that you almost had to get deprogrammed after you talked to him. As it turned out, average consumers were not craving experienced software that would let them render realistic images. The RenderMan didn't take off. There was, however, one company that was eager to automate the rendering of animators, drawing into color images for film. When Roy Disney led a bold revolution at the company that his uncle Walt had designed and founded, the new CEO, Michael Eisner, asked what role he wanted. Disney said that he would like to revive the company's vulnerable but fading animation department. One of his first initiatives was to look at ways to computerize the process, and Pixar won the contract. It created a package of customized hardware and software known as CAPS, Computer Animation Production System. It was first used in 1988 for the final scene at The Little Mermaid, in which King Triton waves goodbye to Ariel. Disney bought dozens of Pixar image computers as CAPS became an integral part of its production. So today I reached 242 pages of Steve Jobs. We'll continue this tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. Drop any comment. Bye.